Cesar, the crowd pleaser. If you need to pick me up, ladies, we gon' change your demeanor. Cesar, the crowd pleaser. We gon' do a little dance, we gon' make the naysayers believe us. Hey girl, had a long day, you tired from work. Throw me some dollars and I remove my shirt. You can touch me too, these are the perks. Free yourself, lose your mind and go berserk, and go berserk, and go berserk, and go berserk.
Make way for the bad guy.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Crowd Pleaser, the podcast that brings you the inside scoop on what it takes to be a male entertainer in today's age. I'm your host, Cesar the Crowd Pleaser, and this is going to be episode 38, where we are going to be bringing on two friends of mine that are photographers that have done various photo shoots with me and other people throughout their careers, and we're going to be discussing the various aspects of doing photo shoots and photography because male entertainment requires a good amount of publication and publicity and advertisement, and constantly keeping your look up to date and giving it to your fans is really important. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and move in and do a little housekeeping. First things first, I want to go ahead and say thank you to all my patrons out there at patreon.com/crowdpleaser. Very appreciative of all the support. My fans really help me continue to produce product and kind of put out stuff for them. I know it kind of lets me know I'm doing the right thing, going down the right path, and I really appreciate it, to the point where my most recent photo shoot has gotten such good feedback. I am actually going to print out 3 different sets of prints from the photo shoot, and I will be mailing that out at the end of the month to my patrons. Different tiers will get different rewards and stuff like that, but I will sign each print and mail it out to you in the mail, so definitely look out for that. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed taking the photos for you. Next is La Bear Dallas. This is my home office. I work there 5 nights a week, Wednesday to Sunday. We have over 15 entertainers of all shapes and sizes and flavors for your enjoyment. So if you're in the area, need a little load off, or want some excitement or some great people watching, definitely come out and check it out. 2 major events we have going on coming up. July 20th is the Sexiest Man Contest. All right, this is a big deal. We have over 40 entertainers coming in, and we do it kind of like a male pageant. The guys will come out in their suits. They'll come out in their evening, night club wear. They'll come out in bathing suits, and then finally do phenomenal brand new routines that we created just for the show to win over the ladies and crowd and be declared the sexiest man in Texas. So it's going to be a great time. Once again, July 20th. Next, my Red charity event, August 17th. It's something I do to kind of give back to the community, break the stereotype of male entertainment. It's we bring in school supplies. I find underprivileged children in schools at the elementary school level that a lot of them are on pay free lunch programs and things like that. And we take in school supplies, anything, notebooks, paper, pens, staples, erasers, backpacks, all that. We collect it all night long. And then that following week, I box it up and take it to a school to donate for free. So the kids can just get a little leg up on their education and stuff when they can't. And it's a great night. It gives us something to come together with, dress in red. And for a main event, we have a lip sync battle. The guys have a ton of fun doing this. Come out and just have a great bunch of laughs, much like the popular show. Well, this year we're actually going to have Christian from Hard Bodies as well as DJ XL coming out and performing in the show as well. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to Colleen from Missouri. She is one of my avid listeners. When I had a message me on Instagram letting me know how much she loves the show, she listens to it all the time, commuting to and from school and work. So that's awesome. Appreciate the shout out, Colleen, and I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, without further ado, I want to introduce my guest on the show. First, she's been shooting for roughly 2 years. I've done several photo shoots with her so far and had a lot of fun. We've both been learning as we go, and definitely creating some great stuff as social media has proven. I want to welcome on the show Jules. How you doing, Jules?
Hey, Cesar, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Sure.
My next guest, I recently started working with him. Had a great time as well. We kind of did a marathon shoot to get a bunch of product out to people. And so I appreciate his patience with me. Phenomenal dude. He's been in photography for over 24 years now. I want to welcome on the show Michael Schulze. How you doing, Michael?
I am awesome. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. All right. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, I photo shoots are a really important thing. I feel like it is a very competitive arena, so to speak, and not necessarily that people are kind of one upping each other trying to battle, but more of that there's so much good product out there as far as types of photos and scenery and backgrounds and effects and things like that, that everyone wants to put out a great product and a great picture. And like I said, social media has changed the way the world works. Now you get your photo can go around the world practically overnight, and so it's made it uh, slightly harder to be unique, but at the same time allowed a lot more creativity to expand and people to kind of explore when someone sees a certain lighting and whatnot. And we're going to be talking about that today on the show. But let's start at stage one. So, Michael, lead us off. What got you into photography, brother?
I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I kind of first went to college, but I knew some of the things I wanted out of a career, which would be, the ability to travel, be something that's always different, and, just something that I could never get bored with. And one time girlfriend saw an ad in the paper for like frat party photography or something, and she was like, "Oh, you should go give that a try. You like to take pictures." And so I did, and that was it. I knew as soon as I started doing it for real that this was it, and I never looked back.
Wow, that's great. So, two
Yeah,
things. One,
lucky.
what kind of camera did you use on that first shoot?
Oh my God, it was an old film Minolta, all manual. It actually had a battery that didn't work, unbeknownst to me. It was it was really old school, really old school.
So,
It's scary how little I knew at the time, and I'm glad I didn't know that I didn't know anything, because I probably would have just quit.
yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes ignorance very much is bliss. I'll
Oh
tell you.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
You look back at your first photos and stuff, and you're like, man, I had no idea what I was doing, huh?
No idea, no idea.
So, question
I
though,
bet, do you go through that too? I mean, do you have like old video of performances and then you look at that and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea. I was so awkward. Or were you just like genius from day one?
oh no, it's very much that. I promise you.
Yeah.
Occasionally, especially with Facebook, when they have those throwback memories, someone will post a picture they took of me like my first year or two of dancing, and I was just like, "Huh? Oh God, that's horrible."
How long have you been doing it?
6.5 years now, brother. 6.5 years.
Okay.
So
So, I mean, are you feeling like you're kind of finding the sweet spot? Like it's all coming together?
not even close. Like women are the
No?
hardest
Okay.
creatures to understand. Every time I think I got something, I'm like, yeah, this works. I'll do it the same thing the next week, and it just bombs. I'm like, okay, back to square
Yeah.
one. The
Yep. Yeah.
So for nostalgic reasons, do you still have like old school cameras like that you kind of shoot with from time to time, or you've just kind of moved on? You're like, that was cute, but I'm good now. I like my up to date stuff.
Up to date stuff. I don't really get too attached to gear. And then I did have my home robbed a year ago, and I got everything wiped out. So all my stuff is brand new. I did have my very first camera, which was a $20 plastic Kodak camera that I bought at Best Buy, and I kept that for a long time until an angry ex smashed it. But so yeah, I did keep one, but then it got trashed. But for me, it's really about the technology and like whatever is gonna, get me to where I need to go. I don't really get attached to the object, so I'm always buying new stuff.
Yeah, right on. I can understand that. It's probably easier to keep down on clutter when it comes to that because I can
Oh, yeah.
imagine the amount of stuff you need to carry, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Uh, Thanks, Michael. Julie, what got you into photography?
Well, I've always been a fan of photography. I remember when I was a teenager, there was this store in the mall. I think it was called Deck the Walls, and they had tons of art and tons of prints. And I would stand there and I would stare. They had this whole wall that was just black and white photography. And I love black and white. Even till today, that's what I produce mostly. And I just, you're young and you just don't know why it draws you. But then I would say about 10 years ago, a lot of my friends started asking, hey, we're getting engaged. Everybody wants free pictures. So, hey, we're getting engaged. Can you just come, take some shots and do some pictures? And I did just for fun. I had no idea how to use my camera. I had a little Canon Power Shot. I think one of those real small little square cameras. And I just, put it on auto mode, had no idea how to work it. And I would say the last couple of years, I just started to find that it was something that just drove me, something I'm very passionate about. And the more I learn, the more I really want to learn. So that's how I started.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like both of you just kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to photography. You just have to get behind the lens, and after a first couple of snaps, like you just end up figuring out, like, yes, this is what something I really want to do. So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Absolutely.
That's
Yep.
pretty cool because, like I said, I can imagine that anyone that knows that you have a decent camera will start hitting you up for favors or for work or whatnot. So
Yeah. It's something I
Hey.
try not to advertise. Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like it kind of overlaps with aspiring tattoo artist. It's kind of one of those things like if you have a camera, the people will find you for practice. It's kind of the same thing with them. It's like, no one's gonna come hit you up for a giant back piece, but if people want names or letters or something, you tell people, hey, I'll do free ink. Like they'll hit you up pretty quickly. So Julie, you do it strictly for a hobby, correct?
I do. I work a very busy full-time, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 job. And, I say it's a hobby, but I think I spend more time on my hobby as I do my work. Photography is very time consuming if you're serious about it. Very. So evenings it's photo editing, weekends it's going out and trying to find opportunities to shoot, and then more editing. So it's a full-time hobby, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, and we'll definitely discuss editing later on because I've come to realize that that's actually taking the picture is I feel sometimes only half the the actual process.
Yeah.
Michael, you're a full time professional photographer, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so let's touch on that a little bit. So Jules had mentioned, she obviously has a day job and things like that, and then does photography on the offhand. Doing it as a profession, I is it one of those things where you are constantly kind of putting yourself out there looking for work and things like that? Have you, because you've been in the game so long, do you have kind of not necessarily a 9 to 5, but somewhat of a schedule like, hey, this company always gets you, or like how does that work doing it as a living?
Well, the first half of my career was freelance, where I was kind of, taking any gig I could just to pay the bills. And there's pluses and minuses with that because you can kind of structure your own time to some degree, and a lot of times you get to sleep in on Monday, and that's awesome. And also, sometimes you make a really high dollar amount per hour, but it's also the other side of the coin is that it is kind of feast or famine. And in December, you're so busy that you're turning away business. And then usually in January, nobody's calling you because it's cyclical, it's kind of a cyclical industry. And that was kind of my reality for the first decade. And then the second decade of my career, I was just like, I'm a little too old for that hustle. And so I have a day job, a Monday through Friday salary gig. And then on top of that, I also work pretty much every night and weekend. I have one weekend a month off. And so, I'm in kind of that mode right now where I have that steady day job to pay the bills and have that nice health insurance. But then I also hustle on top of that to kind of do the fun stuff because, the day job isn't really fun, but the weekend stuff is really, that's kind of like Jules was saying, it takes up so much to your time because it is a passion and you want to put that time into it. And it's fun, but it can be a little much sometimes too.
Yeah, I believe it. The so I want to touch on that too because I think that's really important. So you mentioned you have to pay the bills and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I want our listeners to understand that I know there's negotiating and stuff like that, and people are always like, well, it's pictures and this and that, but they have to understand that it's the amount of equipment, like you said, the amount of time to learn your craft, the that you're taking out, and at the end of the day, if you're taking up your time, you need to pay the bills as well. So how does typically and you don't have to go into specific numbers, but how does pricing work for you, like in general? Is it kind of one of those things where you gauge on time, on edits, on the difficulty of the shoot, like things like that?
Yes, it's you have to kind of take that all into account, and have to have kind of like a number that you, the photographer, are comfortable with, and then there's also what the market will bear, and like with burlesque is something I shoot a lot on the weekends. When I first got into it, nobody was paying a lot, and I just basically just kept raising my price until I found the people that wanted to pay that. And also it allowed me to not have to work a lot with burlesque, in the sense that I was only doing a couple gigs for a lot of money versus a bunch of gigs for a little money. So, I just kind of inched up my price over the years until I found that sweet spot of what the market would bear, and also what it was worth it for my time. And I think that that's kind of the general process that most people go through, is you kind of have to know your worth, but also know what it's worth to your customer, because you may think your work and your time is super super valuable, but to the client, the photos are only going to be worth so much to them, so they only have so much of a budget and to pay for, and so it's about finding that sweet spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your quality, definitely, since I began following you, your quality of show is just incredible. Like the way you capture things and the fact that you're taking pictures, stills of live action, and they still come out as phenomenal they do is a testament to, your
thank,
time is
thank
definitely
you.
worth it.
Thank you.
Uh,
It's hard. I always tell people it's not for me, it's not about talent, just effort, is how I kind of look at it.
yeah,
So I appreciate that you like that.
the public sees the 30 pictures you posted, but they don't see the other 600 you took that night, and you're just like, oh God, no.
Yeah. All the bad ones. Yeah.
Uh, Jules, what's your take on you do stuff, and like you said, people always kind of hit you up for free pictures and things, but how do you deal as far as with your pricing and things like that to value your time and editing?
Well, since I just do it as a hobby and I'm very, very new to photography, I don't charge at this point. I think I'm not sure that I feel comfortable charging because I don't think I've gotten to that level yet. I think, I think I do okay, but I don't know. I think when you charge for pictures, I'm afraid that it'll put a little bit too much pressure on me because when a customer's paying you, you have to get good shots. They're expecting a certain amount of images for what they're paying. So I haven't quite gotten to the point yet where I'm comfortable charging, but I might eventually. Once I get a little bit more experience under me, I think I might. And I'll just have to see at that particular time how I price it out.
Got you, got you. And
Can I jump back in, Caesar?
yeah, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, it was kind of to Jules's point, is when I was first in burlesque, I didn't charge people, and then I found that once people started asking me, that was when I felt I had the ability to charge people. Is once they
Oh,
started coming to me and asking me for work. That was
right.
kind of
Yeah,
my
that makes sense.
mentality.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Because right now I'm just I go places and ask people, "Hey, can I take your pictures?" So, unless someone comes and actually solicits my work, then I might change my opinion. But yeah, I'm not comfortable. But you're absolutely right.
but you'll get there. You'll get there. You just got to keep doing it, and then people see what you're doing, they'll like it, and then eventually you'll be turning them away.
If I
Well,
if I can be
it.
like if I can be like Michael when I grow up, I'll be okay.
The So on that, what is your, since you just mentioned that you do various things on the weekends, go to different events and things like that, what's your favorite subject matter to shoot, Jules?
Oh, me? I if I had to actually categorize myself, I would say street photography. I like action. I like catching people in moments. I like, let's say, Comic Cons, any type of music festivals, art festivals, anything where there's action. I do some portraiture, not a whole lot. Actually, just my recent shoot was probably one of the first ones I've ever done that was an actual stage location shoot, which was very different for me. But I like action. I just on the weekends I go through the I go through the internet and see what's going on locally and just walk around with my camera and hope I get some good shots.
Hmm. Okay. And Michael, what's your favorite subject matter to shoot? I know you had mentioned that you work burlesque a lot, but is that your favorite? And don't worry, like you're not gonna incriminate yourself here.
I like burlesque and aerials. They both, I love the creativity. Like with burlesque, I love the outfits, the makeup, the hair, the creativity of the routines that they make, and just the whole kind of emotional component of it. We had a Star Wars burlesque show last weekend, and man, there was this one routine where it was Han and Leia, and there was not a dry eye in the house. I've always like just heard that cliche, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's funny, but like seriously, like all of us were crying, and it was so beautiful, and that was what draws me to burlesque was that emotional exchange between the performer and the audience, and just it was magical and awesome. And aerials are kind of the same. There's a little less kind of story narrative there, but the physical abilities, the creativity, the skill of doing it is just mind-blowing to me. And so those are probably my two most favorite things to photograph.
Awesome. That's great because I mean, once again, me being a performer as well, I can really appreciate that. And I feel like when you have your own passion in something, it definitely creates a way better final product. Because you appreciate the
Absolutely,
show,
absolutely.
so I feel like you have a better because you appreciate the show. You know what it looks like and what when a photograph interprets and expresses that same emotion. So I think that's one of the reasons why your work ends up being so phenomenal.
Oh,
Um,
thank you. And I
so
can tell when a performer's phoning it in.
Oh, no kidding.
So yeah, it's like the passion is that's kind of like the magic dust of everything. I feel is that that energy and love that we bring to something. And so we occasionally, yeah, you do get a performer up there who's just kind of phoning it in, and we can all tell, but most of them don't. It's awesome.
So it's actually kind of neat because both of you have mentioned your preferences are towards action, and obviously they essentially don't know you're there, so to speak. So I'm gonna ask you first, Jules, and then we'll see what Michael says. But do you have any tips or tricks as far as when you're shooting live action that you've kind of found that works best for you, like either camera settings or lighting or where to be in the crowd and things like that? And then we'll see what Michael says after his level of experience and see if you guys overlap or not.
There's no
um,
wrong answers.
yeah. I'm like, is Michael grading me? Or are you writing this down? Of course, lighting. Lighting is always a big issue. And I like to catch people when they don't know I'm taking the picture. Like if someone looks at my camera, it completely throws off what I'm trying to do because I'm trying to catch somebody, in the midst of doing something that they love. So I think once they acknowledge me, I think that kills that kills my mojo, definitely.
Okay, and so do you typically try to go with a more high powered lens so you can be further away, or do you like a certain level of quote unquote intimacy?
Well, normally the places that I go, except for like when I went to a car show recently and did some photographs, those you can do like a fixed focal length lens. But when you're in a crowd and you really don't know where you're going to have to stand, usually I'll take a zoom lens so I can zoom in and out of depending on how far back I have to stand. So it depends on the venue and the crowd that's going to be there. I always carry a couple in my bag, so once I get there, I actually know what I need. But it just depends on the crowd.
Okay, and do you use any specific like shutter settings or speeds and things like that, or no?
It all depends on what I'm trying to capture.
Sorry, say that again. You broke up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it just depends on where I am and the lighting and what exactly you kind of, it's kind of unless you're using a lens that doesn't zoom, you have to, you have to change your camera settings as you go, especially if the lighting changes.
Okay, yeah, I can roll with that. All right, Michael, what's your feedback on it?
I just use the green square for everything.
No, you don't. I know you don't. I've seen your work.
I'm like, okay, how much secret sauce recipe do I want to give
Oh
away?
yeah, fair
Uh,
enough, fair enough. All right, true story.
no, I'm teasing. I'll tell you anything almost. Um, I since primarily what I do for fun is live. I have a Canon. I don't know how deep down the technical rabbit hole we want to go here, but my primary body is a Canon 5D Mark IV. The primary lens I use most of the time is the 7200 2.8L Canon. And I find that with live stuff, the light is always really dark, and so you got to have a really high ISO. And I also find, when people are moving, like as a product photographer, when you have complete control over every aspect, so you're used to things being in extremely sharp focus, and so I find that I tend to bring some of that mentality to my live work in the sense that I don't like blurry images. They just drive me nuts. So my shutter speed is probably higher than most people, because I've seen some other people's settings, and I'm generally a little bit faster on the shutter speed than most people, because I want that subject to be crisp and stopped and not blurry. And so that also necessitates that your f-stop is pretty wide open. And so most people who shoot live, we all are kind of in that same ballpark of settings.
Yeah,
But it's hard. I mean, I find that burlesque is I've done a lot of different types of photography over the years, and burlesque is one of the most difficult ones because you don't know what's going to happen. It's usually really dark. It happens really fast, and you only get one shot at it. And to make all the elements kind of line up and be pretty is pretty difficult. And I've shot race cars and babies and other things, and they're easier than burlesque because it is so chaotic and dark, and so it's tough. It's a tough thing to photograph.
it's actually it just came to me. I might have to also hit you up off the air about possibly trying to set up a shoot where we can catch some of my fire poi, because
Oh, hell yeah. Hell
I've
yeah.
seen some really interesting photos with people doing fire, both with slow shutter speed, so you kind of have that flame trail that makes a pattern, as
Mhm.
well as getting a good speed where you get an actual spin, but it's still super clear. So we'll talk about that later on and maybe capture that, whether it be the night that you come out to the club or something else. So that's neat. Like I said, I think there's a lot more photographers or at least hobbyists out there in the world, because I know, especially when I started performing, I feel like our club is a uh, very popular stomping grounds for photographers to come in. I can't tell you how often I get someone coming up to me and be like, I'd love to have you in front of my lens, or we should do a shoot and things like that. And I kind of take your mentality where it's kind of like, well, if you're asking me, then we need to talk some money. Um,
Exactly.
but
Okay, so an aside, what is the photo policy there? I've never been there, so I don't know what the rules are.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because if you go to any gentleman's club, it is zero photography, 100%. I feel like we are extremely lax on that. Um, and it's just because we're not technically a strip club. We don't have like a sexually oriented business. I don't know if I was supposed to say that, but it's not a big deal. Anywho, so we allow photography. We've tried to really slam down on video, because if you go to any other show, they really don't allow it. And now in the age of Snapchat and everything else and Facebook Live, people really try to record. And I feel like it takes away from our show. One, people aren't really watching the show when they're recording, and two, if people can see our show on social media, what incentives do they have to come to the club? So as of right now, stills are more or less allowed, for the most part, and then we just kind of try to limit, if we can, people's obviously photographer is where we're at right now. I've made a couple of pushes to get rid of all of it altogether because I think it's easier to control that way in an all or nothing. But either way, like I mean, if they see someone in there with the kind of equipment you have, they're gonna assume you're there for a reason, and it won't be an issue.
Yeah.
Um, the lighting will probably be the biggest issue for you because we have a really dynamic show. Main stage, which shouldn't probably be an issue. Side stages might be a little bit more of an issue just because the lighting there, even though it doesn't change as often, it does change, and it's a little more they'll keep a single color on us a little bit longer on side stages, but it does randomly change. Versus main stage, it's much like how when you shot the showcase I'm shooting the other burlesque shows, where I don't know how much they change the lighting, but our lighting changes
Continually.
Yeah.
It's continually in motion. It's chaos.
I know there's one picture I saw that you took of, I think, 4 aerialists, and it's a great picture, and you end up posting it. And I know you were probably kicking yourself because 4 out of the 4, 3 of the performers are in the light and perfect, and then the 4th one is like almost completely silhouetted because she just happened to be in the dark. And like I know
Oh yeah.
that was out of your control, but I can
Oh, yeah.
imagine you going through the pictures and be like, I must have one with all 4 of them in the light.
No, I know what show you're talking about, and yeah, it was brutal. That was a hard show because yeah, anybody in the back, they were in the shadow, and because as a photographer, I want everybody to get something for themselves, and when I miss somebody, when they don't get like their own nice photo, that always kind of kills me a little inside because I feel like I kind of failed them that way. But also at the same time, it is out of my control. So you do the best you can. But yeah, those were like rough. It's like no.
One quick question on that. Since you're doing such live shots and you obviously don't know, I would assume that majority of the time you don't know the choreography that people are doing. Do you just end up kind of throwing your camera on rapid fire and taking, 5 seconds worth of shots, or do you still kind of try to single semi-automatic, so to speak, your pictures when you think the timing is right?
It's kind of a combination. Sometimes I have the ability to go to tech, and so I kind of know what's coming. But the fact that it is so fast moving and the lighting at the shows is in continual motion. Sometimes it's kind of a spray and pray kind of situation where you just take a lot of photos and then you just pick the best ones and edit them. Because I find that, with live stuff, if I wait to get the shot, I've missed it. It's happened. I can't react that quick. So I kind of have to be kind of shooting through the motion and then kind of pick the good one. So yeah, it's a lot of frames per second and a lot of garbage that gets deleted in order to kind of get those nice, well-timed ones.
Yeah, I've going through edits myself. I completely understand that. Jules, you like working in public, outdoor, natural lighting, and as well doing action shots. So what's your take as far as dealing with lighting? Not necessarily that it's more dynamic, but just the fact that you can't control if it's going through trees, you can control where the sun is in the sky, as well as capturing people performing out. Because you mentioned going to a fair and stuff, so musicians and things like that.
It's exactly what Michael said. You've got to be ready and you've just got to spray and pray. I like that. I've got to remember that. You just, because by the time your eye sees something happening, it's gone. So something you can't react, your camera can't react that fast. So sometimes you just miss some really good shots. And sometimes if you just shoot straight through, you get lucky. You get that perfect moment. Out natural lighting, I tell you, when I first started, I thought natural lighting was going to be the easiest lighting for me to learn. It's actually been the hardest because it just depends on where you are. Like the last shoot I did, and I think people think, oh, well, just move where you need to go, move in the shade or move in the sun. Sometimes you don't have that option because the backdrop or the background of what you're trying to take, you have complete shade and then 2 inches over, you have complete sun. So you just really have to work with, your camera can only do so much. So that's where Lightroom comes in. You can do some pretty, you can fix lighting pretty well in Lightroom. I've had to do it often. Like I had one picture that was fantastic, but one side it was completely shaded and the other side it was just, 2 p.m. sunshine. So, sometimes you just have to take the shot and hope that you can fix the lighting later. But yeah, natural light has actually been a challenge for me, but it's fun. It's definitely a learning curve.
So Well, you drop. Let's go ahead and use that segue of editing into it, and I'll start off with this for you to kind of caveat the two or put them together. So you mentioned lighting, and then obviously having to deal with things like that and editing. Now you prefer to do black and white photos, which you do a phenomenal job on it. Some of my most popular photos uh, that were black and white, you're the one that took them and edited them. So do you feel like knowing that your pictures are going to end up being black and white, does that change A, the way you take the picture or the way you look at them? And then B, does it hurt or help you when it comes to lighting? Like, does it, knowing that you can change this to black and white, does that make the natural lighting a little easier to work with, a little more difficult? Like, how are your takes on that?
Well, I shoot in RAW. So all the images I have, they edit better when you edit them in Lightroom. And, when I'm taking a certain shot, I don't, I shoot everything in color initially. And sometimes you don't know until you actually get it out of your camera whether it's going to fit color or black and white. And I always go by mood. Like, when I look at the photograph, what am I trying to portray? What am I trying to get someone else to feel? And sometimes you just have to do color. It just depends on what it is. And black and white, I tell you, one of the most hurtful things anyone has ever said to me, I've taken a few photography classes, and I had an instructor say that black and white was a lazy way to be a photographer. And that that hurt. That, because that's what I love. And anyone who spent any time with me editing, even editing black and white, if you're doing it the way you envision, it can take a really long time. So it's not just downloading a picture in color, hitting the black and white button and uploading it. It's not that simple. You still have to fix shadows and highlights and whites and blacks. And so it's still the same amount of editing, I think, as color. But yeah, that was hurtful. I couldn't believe you said that, but I do get a lot of criticism by other photographers who don't understand black and white. But that's just what I love, and that's going to be what I continue to do.
Yeah, and there's a certain beauty to it in the fact that I feel like obviously one can make the argument that because of the different shades and stuff, like there's a bunch of different colors in black and white as well. But I feel like sometimes when you're taking shots outside or something that has a lot in the background or what they're wearing has a lot of color, it sometimes can um, kind of overpower what the actual subject is versus when it's black and white, you're seeing exactly what the picture is. If it's a model, you're looking at the model. If it's a building, you can see the shape and the architecture of the building and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily take away. I feel like it just makes you focus somewhere else, essentially, sometimes. Um, Michael, what? Tell us a little bit about your editing, and not necessarily your tricks of the trade and stuff. Just in general, kind of the things you try to maybe look for, or the frustration that you have sometimes, and things like that.
I just look for whatever elicits an emotional response from me. Like that's generally kind of my primary decision making tool. Is does this evoke a response? And of course, it has to have the technical characteristics that I need. But sometimes if something really moves me, I'll kind of let go some of those, technical issues of, is it in focus enough, or is the composition like I want it? Because, if something moves you, those things don't matter. And so that's kind of, when I'm scrolling through the thousands of images from a show, that's generally kind of how I do the first pick is, what moves me. Because I find that those are ultimately the best photos because, you can take something that technically is perfect, but if there's kind of no emotional content, nobody wants to look at it. That's boring. So, that's kind of how I go is, what jumps out at me, when
Okay.
I'm editing.
Yeah. So my little 2 cents on it, and this is when we'll start kind of leaning a little more towards the male model things and male entertainment and stuff like that. Is I'm a perfectionist, plain and simple. I've been like that my whole life, and I continue to do so. And when I realized that photos are forever, you take a picture, it will last, especially now on software, like until the end of time and until the internet goes down. And so I take the time of prepping as far as dieting and water depletion and try to get lighting and all the little things I can do to make myself as best as I can for the picture. And so when I look at editing, I also try, uh, because I work so hard, I want the photo to be as much as me as possible, or whatever I'm capturing, like as raw, so to speak. But I mean, if you have the option of cleaning things up, I use it, and I hope that the photographers I shoot with as well, when I give them feedback, things like that we can't control necessarily, like acne or like a curve, like if the shirt, like that happened to me one time where I took a photo in a collared shirt and a suit, and for whatever reason the jacket flap was open instead of closed. So I went in there and cleaned it up and corrected it so it looked closed. Anything like that, blemishes, I get rid of. Not necessarily because I think they look bad or not, but it's like, this is advertisement. This is a picture I want to show of being quote unquote a fantasy man. And so I try to essentially make the pictures perfect, like remove zits and things like that. How much of that do you apply in your photos and your photo editing? Mike, if you want to take that one first.
Um, all of it. It is kind of, I'm in kind of a, I don't want to call it, I'll call it a weird position with burlesque, because there is so much uh, performer emotion involved, and some performers want you to hide every flaw. Other performers want you to leave every flaw and will get offended if you Photoshop something out. And so I have to find the balance with that. Generally, I try to, I always go off what the person, the subject, kind of where they're at. And sometimes I'll message people privately and be like, hey, where are you at with this? Sometimes people message me and are like, hey, can you fix this little thing? But and then there's other people that don't want anything touched. And so by asking directly, but also paying attention when the subject comes up in social media, I've kind of generally know what people want there. But if it's up to me, I fix all the quote unquote flaws, especially stuff like acne, or you know things that nobody would probably want in there. And then if I'm not sure, I'll ask people, how much do you want me to fix you? And generally they'll tell you. So it's tricky. But if it were up to me, again, coming from, I'm a perfectionist too, and I do product for a living, so that has to be completely perfect. That's kind of where I come from. But I'm willing to let it go if it's what's needed.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I feel like it like you said, it's preference, and it's what kind of shoot you're doing. Because I know a big thing in the female community is doing like demolition and destruction shoots where they rip up a dress, or like they throw food at each other or something like that. And then obviously those, it's like they're gonna be messy. Like you don't need the cake splatter to look perfectly symmetrical and things like that. But when you're doing something that's going to be a presentation or something like that, you definitely want. And like I said, I don't necessarily feel like you need to make the person look cartoony or make them look absolutely like sculpted out of ivory or anything, or marble or anything like that. But little things that you can control that just happen to be random, like a hair sticking out of, like, that's a big thing, especially now with long hair that I have, is that the backdrop will be a single color, everything will look great, and then I have like a random flock of hair sticking out, and it bugs me because I'm just like, oh god, it's not like, why is that there? So I'm like, screw it.
That drives me crazy too.
Yeah. And to more power to the people that like the natural look. Jules, how about you? How do you feel about kind of your editing when you're perfecting things or not, or how far down that rabbit hole do you go?
Oh, I go all the way to the bottom. It's the little things. Something huge could be out of place and I'm okay. It's, the hair's out of place. There was one picture I just took recently and it was a gorgeous shot. And right underneath the chair that the person was sitting in, there's this spring sticking out of the chair. And and sometimes I can catch those things when I'm shooting, but sometimes you're so focused on the bigger picture, some of those things you just don't notice. They're, you just don't. So I will spend, yeah, I spend for cloning those little bitty things out. So that's what I spend most of my time on, just the really nitpicky little things that, maybe no one else would even notice. But because I know it's there, that's right where my eye's gonna go. So that's what I do a lot of. Yeah, I do a lot of that stuff.
It's actually really great that you mentioned that no one's going to notice it because that was one of my first impressions when I started to do professional, modeling and photography and stuff like that. Is I've gotten very quick at going through proofs and picking which ones I want edited because I know I have my checklist of things to look for. Face, abs, shadowing, things like that, looks. And so I know how to eliminate, like, yeah, I don't like this one. Yeah, I don't like this one. Yes, this is the best one. But I've had several photographers, and I definitely recommend it to you too if you don't do it already, um, to keep the proof and the edit nearby whenever you are giving the product to whoever hired you, because sometimes it goes a long way. Because it's happened to me, is what I'm saying. They showed me a picture of the edit, and I was like, it looked great. It was awesome. And, and I was impressed. I was like, wow, you didn't really need to do that much. That was pretty good. And I didn't mean it as an insult. I like the fact that I felt like the photographer didn't really like overdo anything. And he's like, huh, funny you say that. And he went and put them side by side and even like back and forth them a little bit. And it was absolutely incredible. He actually did quite a bit of work on the photo, and it was one of those things like when women kind of compliment themselves when people are like, "Oh, you're not wearing any makeup," and they actually are. It was kind of one of those. It was kind of one of those things where he just did so many little things. He changed my skin tone just a little bit to be more accurate. Like, how sometimes white lighting kind of brightens up the skin a little bit, and so I still look tan, but it was a weird kind of whitish tan, and he just made it a little bit darker, cleaned up, like little things, a couple of hairs, cleaned up, stuff like that. And then it turned out something that I thought maybe might have taken him 20, 30 minutes to do. He could have easily spent 2 hours just kind of modifying every little thing, a little extra shadowing here and there and things like taking wrinkles out of the pants. It was just, so it's really neat to see that. And it's something that I think you guys should have on hand occasionally when people do kind of question the edits and stuff. Be like, actually, look, this is how much I did for you. Not that it comes up very often, but it just, when you are that perfectionist and you go and start cleaning up all the little things, it's very easy for someone to look and be like, oh, that picture is great. You barely had to touch it. Like, oh, well, actually, how about that? And much like I could see that, especially with you, Michael, where you have a shot, and maybe because they're on stage with multiple people. Let's go back to that one photo that we were talking about with the three people in the light and one person that wasn't, and it wasn't her fault. I could see you sitting there trying to maybe even layer that and try to brighten her up or adjust things in Lightroom to bring her out. That if you were able to achieve the level that you were going to, she would have never noticed that you did all that extra effort. She would just been like, oh, it's a great picture of four of us and I'm in it. That's awesome. But, behind the scenes, you took an extra, who knows, 45 minutes to try to bring her up to the limelight, so to speak, with everyone else.
Absolutely. And sometimes in those scenarios, I actually swap people out of different photos and make a composite of the different performers from different photos, and then make it into one. And my goal is usually I don't want anybody to notice the photoshopping and the work and the edit. I want them to just think it's like that, so that they're catching the emotional essence of the photo and not getting distracted by the kind of photo technicalities surrounding it. And so yeah, it is. We spend a lot of time trying to make it perfect without making it look like we spend a lot of time making it perfect.
Yeah, it's one of those. Man, it's one of those things about the job, is what it is, and I feel you on that. Any performer can say the
Yeah.
same thing, where you're putting in hours and days and nights of rehearsals and effort to put on a X amount of show, which is by ratio insignificant to the amount of prep work you do. Obviously, my shows are about 3 to 5 minutes long, but I'll spend months choreographing them, putting them together, rehearsing them, and whatnot. The same thing for you guys. You post a single photo that someone can admire, let's say at the top end for a minute, but you easily spent between actually taking the picture and going through editing and all that stuff, 3, 4 hours on that single shot.
Yep.
Uh, so let's talk a little bit about that prep time. So we discussed editing. Um, Obviously, Jules, you do a little bit of more in it. independent work as far as like catching people in their natural element and stuff like that. Michael, you're hired to go do shows primarily and stuff like that. But let's talk a little bit about the prep time. Um, so for me, being the model, I like I discussed or touched on earlier. I my prep time starts a month out, where I start adjusting my diet, really tightening it down, maybe changing my workouts to kind of bring out a little more definition, and just make sure I'm in the best shape I possibly can for the shoot. I typically, if I know what kind of shoot I'm doing, I'll go ahead and do market research online, try to get even printouts of poses and looks I want to do. And I'm really fast about quick change. Like being a performer at LeBaire, quick change is quick change. I can get in and out of looks fairly quickly as long as the costume I'm putting on or uniform isn't very fragile. Um, to kind of save time, I like to be there early. And, honestly, I used to do it. I'm really bad about it now. I don't know why, but I used to kind of get like a blood pump going before shoots. If it was strictly physique, do a quick workout, 5-10 minute workout, squats, pull ups, push ups to just kind of get the blood flowing and make my muscles a little more defined. And I use I don't use oil on stage because obviously I'm a fire performer and I just don't want to be sweaty and slick and gross. But for photo shoots, I do use it. I do feel like it does help bring out shadows and lines when it comes for definition and lighting. And that's pretty much it. I like to maybe have a phone call with the photographer ahead of time or a discussion to at least talk about get on the same sheet of music of what we're planning on doing. And once we're there, that's pretty much it. I have another thing I've picked up over my course of modeling is a set of poses and facial expressions and kind of looks that work, that the generic ones that I try to do, which helps kind of speed up the process while we're doing the photo shoot. I'll hit those poses every time. It's like, okay, once you got the lighting for this pose, then I'll hit all 3 or 4 facial expressions, all 3 or 4 physique poses, and then we can kind of do some independent work. And just little things like that I like to do to be a little more professional and kind of save us on time. Uh, Michael, you talked about your equipment and things like that. Tell us a little bit about your prep time, both before and at the shoot.
For a live show, it's all about, having your batteries charged and your cards empty because, you don't have any time to fool around with your gear not being properly set. But like a studio shoot, same things apply. But yeah, like you were saying, there's a lot more research that goes into, what are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the parameters that we have to operate in as far as the location, the time, how many power outlets does it have? And, are they 3-prong or not? You can really get into the weeds on the planning aspect. And I feel that, you have to, so that when you're in the shoot itself, you're focused. How I like to work is I have everything set up before the model comes onto the set so that when they do, I'm only focused on them. I'm not tweaking lights. I'm not worried about the camera. Like I'm purely focused on that person and, creating that which we are trying to do. So, being a perfectionist kind of plays into that as far as, having your gear, functional and ready to go. And the prep time, it can vary, but, I always say that, the pushing of the button is actually the easiest, shortest part of the entire process. Just like you with your performance, it's 3 to 5 minutes when you're up there, but people don't see the days and months that go into getting you to that moment. And, I feel if we do our job right, they won't notice because it goes off flawlessly. And, that's kind of the attitude I try to bring in is to just be ready. But then also once it's go time, you have to be flexible to a new creative thing happening.
Yeah.
So be prepared, but be flexible.
Yeah, I know. I think that's great. Really well put. All right, Jules, try to top that. No, I'm just kidding. What
Okay,
so
no,
what?
okay. Everything Michael said, I'll just add on to it. Like the last one I did, I've only actually done one location shoot, and it was just amazing at the amount of on the weekend and you're going to do a festival, of course, like Michael said, you charge your batteries, you have everything ready. What type of lenses do you think you're going to need? You have your basic prep work, and that's for any type of photos that you take. But a location shoot, locations are expensive. When you actually do a rental, So I think it's first talking to your subject and seeing, are we going to do a theme? Because theme shoots are a little bit different because you have to have every single detail of, what type of background do we need for whatever type of outfit, costumes, whatever it is that you're doing. So it's just finding a location that's going to fit, getting the schedule down. Normally, when you rent a location, you only pay for a certain set of time. So you have to be prepared, when you get there. And sometimes you think you know everything you're going to need, but then you get there and, there's something you should have remembered. And I actually bought this. I was gifted this big, it's kind of like a sports wagon. So the night before, I mean, fans, baby wipes, water, tripods, camera equipment. It's a lot of prep work. I think I started probably about, I think I booked the venue about a month out and started actually sitting down. I mean, I'll actually sit down every day, and as things come to mind, I'll write them on a list. These are all the things that you're going to need. So I would say about a month prep time for the last one that I did, and it was very time consuming, but it was a lot of fun. Phenomenal, phenomenal day.
Good, good. That's great. It definitely. I hope our listeners appreciate the kind of intricacies that go on uh, behind the scenes, behind the camera, so to speak. Because obviously, half the time they're just there, show up and shoot, or doing their own thing. So let's talk a little bit about during the shoot. And I know it's a little less interactive, possibly for you, Michael, because you're obviously uh, trying to capture performances. So it's not really like you could be like, all right, stop, hold that pose for a second, or like, can you move your hand over here? But so once again,
I
for me,
wish.
yeah. Well, let's see. Well, you did mention that you're there for tech rehearsals and stuff like that. Do you ever kind of are you there just as a spectator and kind of see what you're going to be filming later, or do you ever kind of whip out the camera during that time and maybe try to capture a couple of things that I mean, I'm sure there's still a certain level of emotion that goes in when people are practicing and maybe a hiccup happens and they smile or they nail a move on the stage for the first time, that they're practicing at and they get excited or things like that. Does anything like that happen during?
I do sometimes photograph tech. It's more for my own sake to just kind of get, warmed up. It's like batting practice. I find most performers with tech, it's really just kind of finding your spots on the stage. A lot of times they're not in costume or makeup. They're not in the emotional headspace, so they're just kind of going at half speed. So I don't really expect there to be any photos out of tech. It's more just I want to see what's going to happen so that when it does happen live, I'm ready for it.
Okay. And so, like, for example, we did do a kind of staged shoot as well. You and I did. And how was that for you? Like, was there something like, did you kind of like, I guess, feedback for me, so to speak, next time we do another shoot like that, where there's a set of, it was an aerial shoot, so we were looking for specific shapes and things like that. We obviously ran into some technical issues as far as we realized we needed a third person to kind of hold us down or move us around. So because I can't control the way the apparatus spins and things like that. And obviously
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
flex while in the air, holding myself up is an issue for me. So
But
what
you
was
did
your take?
well. It looked good. It
I,
looked good.
I blame your editing. Your editing skills is what saved us. So what feedback do you have from that?
Oh God. That was really my first shoot in a lot of ways of kind of getting back into the studio. So I feel like I need more critique than you do. You guys did a really good job. I was kind of scrambling around trying to see if I could get something to happen. And
24 years
yeah,
of experience right there, ladies and gentlemen.
yes, yeah. Well, what I like about it is, the trying new things is that it's fun, and it also keeps you humble. Because it's like starting over again, and you're making all the mistakes, and you don't know what you're doing, and so like it's actually kind of fun in ways to kind of be starting it over. it's scary. Is the only way to get better is to try new things, which I would imagine I've seen that you're into a lot of different kind of subjects and topics of activity. I would think that when you're starting a kind of a new skill, you're rusty and you're uncertain, and but at the same time, there's that kind of joy of discovery that happens. Is
Yeah,
that
no.
Do you find that?
Yeah, it's actually funny that you said that, I would have never known that was the first time you were in a studio in a long time, honestly. Like you flowed really well. I know there was a lot of lighting adjustments going on, but I feel like whenever you're doing anything aerial wise, like there's going to be a lot of flexibility required just because it's just the nature of the beast. Maybe one day when I've got 6, 7 years of aerials underneath my belt, I can control myself a lot better and what we're doing in the air. But it was one of those things where you and I were trying to capture a shape, and it's like, okay, wait till I swing in the right direction, and then you had to make sure the lighting was in the correct angle, and it's tough. It was because you
Yeah, it
definitely
was.
carried yourself very well. So I'm glad it was a kind of explorative thing for both of us. Um, Jules, how about you? What kind of stuff do you like? What kind of techniques do you apply during the shoot, and what would you like to see out of your model to help kind of joint effort to make the best product possible?
Um, well, since, I'm fairly new to shooting, actual models, I think just people who, anybody who's worked with you, professionally, you're all about getting the job done. And I think that's the biggest thing is just, showing up, wanting to work hard and being open and being flexible because sometimes the shots that, you might think sound silly are actually the best ones. So I think just being open-minded and willing to try new things and have a general idea of it always helps when the person knows exactly what they want. I think that goes a long way. And anybody who knows you, when you say, "Hey, I have an idea," they already know it's going to be pretty grandiose. You don't your ideas your ideas never come with basic. So, and I think that's fantastic. It challenges. I know for me personally, it's always a challenge, but that's what I think. Just having an idea of what you want and being willing to work hard to communicate.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. So, from my perspective, for all the male models out there, or even models in general, I mentioned that I have my pre-selected repertoire of expressions and poses and things like that. It definitely helps save on time, and it helps the photographer when you just get that shot. So, definitely have that in mind. One thing I've seen, which I've never done because I feel like it's quote unquote kind of conceited, it's awkward for me, but I really need to do it is one of the models I shot with. She hired me to be, so to speak, a prop for her, and she was just using me. I don't think my face was even in any of the photos. She was just using my body, but she had a handler come with her, and she brought a full size mirror, and I was just like, man, I don't think. I mean, I'm taking photos already. I don't think I need a mirror pointed at me, but it made a lot of sense because she just had the mirror positioned just off of the photographer, so she saw what she looked like in the picture more or less, and she could adjust. And I think that's a great tool to use when possible. I mean, obviously, I've done stuff in the air and stuff outside where last thing I need is a giant sunbeam blasting at me from the mirror. But it's a tip that could help. The other thing I try to do as well, every photographer is going to need to set up their lighting, set up their focus, set up their speeds and the settings on the camera that's way more advanced than me. So just understand that when you get that position, hold it, give it the time that they need to do what they need to, relax, kind of get yourself mentally prepared. And they'll tell you, like, okay, cool. They'll just start taking random pictures of you while you're standing there. It's fine. Just let them get the lighting down. And when you're ready, then go into the mode. Uh, Doing physique and modeling and things like that, the two things I like from the photographer is I don't mind critiques and corrections. I'm not the one behind the camera, the photographer is. So it definitely says a lot to me when they can. For example, if you're doing something where you're facing the camera and maybe hands out or there's a prop, the photographer taking the time to be like, hey, move your left hand out, towards away from you an inch and things like that, I think really goes a long way because there have been several times during my earlier shoots where I would go through proofs together with the photographer and a photo is absolutely amazing, except that maybe, my eyes are looking somewhere else or my hand is twisted in an awkward position. And it's one of those things like you're already out of costume, you're out of the mood. I might have already ate something after to kind of, because I'm starving. And so you kind of lose that look by something that could have been corrected by one sentence during the shoot. And I understand sometimes you don't see that because you're still looking through a preview screen, but when you can correct it, do it, because what I've learned is that sometimes what feels natural doesn't look natural on the camera, or vice versa. For example, I recently did a photo shoot for a comic book series, and so I was holding weapons during the shoot, and sometimes you have to hold that weapon awkwardly physically for it to look good in the photo. And that's fine. Like you're holding it for the photo. It doesn't matter if you feel it is the most awkward shape possible. If it looks good on camera, then that's what everyone else is going to think. And so getting that kind of feedback really goes a long way from the photographer. So it's one of those things you can set up ahead of time, and try not to. Yeah, I don't know if you're one of those people in general. I mean, just whoever the listeners are that's doing the photo shoot. If they're telling you to do something, like understand it's the way it looks and just do it. Like Julie said, be flexible. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like at the end of the day, you're gonna look at the proofs too. You could be like, no, that looks horrible. Don't dare post that. But sometimes it's like, hey, I'm really glad you adjusted me in that way. Bring your chin up. Look down. Look towards this corner. Look towards that corner. It really goes a long way. It helps the team effort. The other thing that thankfully I think other than physique models, most women don't have to deal with, but I do, is flexing. Like I flex. It's the way my muscles look good in pictures. It's what I want to do. That being said, flexing takes a lot of work, especially when you have to think about flexing your entire body. So I always like when photographers kind of give me a countdown. When we get into a rhythm, we get into a rhythm. If I can hear the shutter speed or the shutter click, then that's even better. But normally, okay, cool, we're good. 3, 2, 1, take the picture. Really goes a long way for me to flex, relax, so I'm not utterly exhausted. Because sometimes trying to smile while you're flexing your shoulders and abs and chest and then holding your body in a twist, it's not the easiest thing to do. That helps. Also, back to the feedback thing, we know where the lighting is. Lean forward, lead back, turn a little bit, twist just a little more to your left. All those things that really let the light hit you go a long way for making the perfect photo. There have been times where we go back into editing and you're looking at 5 or 6 proofs of the same pose, and it just one time you hit the right lighting and the right angle, and it just takes the picture from a 7 to a 10, and both you and the photographer are just like, yes, that's the one. So definitely a good thing. And I think that's it. I like lighting. I like lighting a lot. Shading, either underlight or overhead light, really goes a long way as well for ab definition and just muscle definition in general. And sometimes, honestly, it creates a really artistic look. Michael, I know you've probably seen that when they give a performer a spotlight, like kind of like the god light directly above them, and
Yes.
it blacks out the rest of the stage, but that one person is just perfectly highlighted. It creates a really cool effect, I think. So that
Yep.
goes a little ways. And like you guys both said, trying new things as well. Michael, we played with fog a little bit. I know that was one of your little hidden passions that you kind of expressed during our shoot. And it created a couple of cool effects, but it was a learning process. But at the end of the day, if you take 30 bad creative pictures and 2 good ones out of it, then I feel like that's a success.
Yep. It's like the pictures I regret the most are the ones I never took. Some of them I still remember right now. and so like totally agreeing with you. It's like you just gotta, go for it and be open-minded and have fun with it.
Yep. Yeah. And one last thing about that, two-way communication. Like Jules said, let the photographer know what you're trying to achieve, and then you can work together. Because especially when that's why it's good to sometimes have printouts of pictures that you want to, so they know what look you're going for. If you're kind of trying to catch a hair flip, the photographer might think that you want it when your hair's already down. You are thinking that you want it when your hair's up. Things like that, little things like that you really want to communicate. And then the photographer, once they see how to make it happen on their end, they can better guide you as to how they want it to look. If you, for example, if you're doing a rain shoot, you want it to capture like the water dripping off your face or whatever, then they understand that, and they can adjust, maybe zooming in closer to catch those little aspects and things like that. So definitely communicate with them, especially if you're trying to do a special effect. Like occasionally I like to kind of break the third wall, so to speak, and throw something at the camera or do something that makes it look like I'm directly engaging uh, the person, both on stage or in studio. So those are the things that are a little more unique, off the beaten path, that you really have to make sure that you're both on the same sheet of music to make it happen. And at the same time, they might see something mid photo. Like I'm sure both Jules and Michael have seen it, where you're in the middle of a shoot and then all of a sudden something just clicks. You'd be like, hold on, I'm going to move over here, or let me stand up on this and see what this does. And you create another avenue that creates another perspective that's really good that you may have not essentially planned. So yeah, Jules, do you have anything to add after that little spiel I had, I guess?
No, I think everything has been said.
Awesome. Michael, how about you, now that I'm off my soapbox?
No, I think
Awesome. So real quick, if you guys don't mind, just your professional opinion. Like I said, I mentioned overhead lighting and stuff for definition. And one of the things, I'm not gonna lie, Michael, that you really impressed me with is one of the shots that we took was you create a blue background strictly off of just using light. I thought that was super neat, and that's just a compliment to your years of experience and just your professionalism trying to explore stuff. Like you used 5 different lightings to create it, but it was amazing. So, what's your take on as far as like straight lighting and diffusing lighting?
it's light is just a tool for the artist, like anything else, like your lens, your camera, your props. It's all about what is the message that I'm trying to send. What emotion am I trying to convey? What is our goal here for this photo? And I kind of work backwards from there as far as, okay, that what will we do to accomplish that? And somebody in your profession, maybe I'll use a little bit harder lighting to bring out more definition of your abs, where if I were photographing a female, you might want to use softer lighting in order to kind of hide some wrinkles and such. So the tools are, I feel, always dependent upon what the message is.
Okay, cool, awesome.
That,
All right, last thing before we call it a show. Like I said, I've touched various times on social media. I use it a lot for feedback. I like to know what my fans and my audience likes and how to make myself better and improve, as well as figuring out what I'm doing wrong. And so, as photographers, that's kind of how you guys get your message out as well. You post your pictures, people share it. The subjects that you do the pictures for, they want to share them with the world as well. Let's talk a little bit. How do you deal with both positive and negative feedback coming from all avenues? Obviously, Jules, you mentioned one of your instructors from the various classes you've taken. So let's have you start off. Like, how do you deal with critiquing?
I'll tell you, I have had to grow a very thick skin since I've started photography because, everybody has an opinion, and it's humbling to put something out there, just like you going on stage every night. That's tough because you're putting yourself out there every single night for criticism. Good, either people saying good things, people saying bad things. Um, you know, I say criticism is only as good as its source. And now, if Michael says, "Hey, I think you need to adjust something," I'm going to grab a pen and a paper and I'm going to pay attention to what he says. But, sometimes people just, I don't know if, and especially with social media, if I can insult you, then I feel better about myself. So sometimes you have to just kind of take it with a grain of salt and, keep on going. I love the comments. A lot of times I'll get comments from people who don't even follow me on Instagram, and they'll find one of my pictures through a hashtag for whatever subject it is, and they'll just pay me random compliments. Those I really like that. But I'm all for constructive criticism. So if someone who I respect has something to say, absolutely, because I want to improve. But I think it's just determining, who's saying it and what are their motives for saying it. But you definitely have to have a thick skin to, to deal with it.
Okay. And do you have a soundboard, kind of like a small group of other photographers that you kind of bounce ideas with and stuff like that, or actually your photos and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or do you strictly just kind of keep it to the general public?
Oh no, actually, some of my best stuff I don't put online. So, I have a few girlfriends who aren't photographers, and I'll show them pictures and kind of just get their reaction because so I get a general population opinion, and then I have two other friends who are photographers, and they're kind of my sounding boards. I'm like, hey, look at this. What do you think of the lighting, or things that maybe I think could have been done better? Just ask their opinion. So I think it's very important to have people that can provide you feedback.
Okay, okay. Michael, what do you have?
Oh man, dude, that is such a can of worms. Social media is definitely an interesting beast, and I try to take it all with a grain of salt. I do feel like the highest compliment is when a performer makes my photo their profile. I love that. It's them saying, "This is how I want the world to see me," and that's kind of the highest compliment, other than being paid, that I can get. So the negative stuff, on social media, I try to always, I say a lot of times about my photography that it's not about me, Michael. It's about the work, and so I don't really get too agitated about that. I will say though that when I was in art school, when I was young, um, those critiques from my peers were some of the most brutal, ego crushing experiences of my life. Because at the time I was kind of in a Robert Mapplethorpe kind of vibe, and so there was a lot of naked photos of myself that were put on the wall for critique. So not only are you up there naked as a person, but also as a photographer, and then to have your peers and professors at times completely for your own benefit rip on you, it's kind of tough. But if you are going to be in this business, you have to be able to take that, because everything you post is now fodder for critique, good or bad. And so, I try to take it all with a grain of salt and be positive. I'm pretty self-driven. So if at the end of the day I like the photo, that's usually carries more weight than what everybody else says. But at the same time, I am a human being with an ego, and I do like it when people have nice things to say. It feels good, but at the same time, you have to still maintain kind of a realistic perspective, because social media isn't really real that way. It's kind of a facade of sorts, and so you can't get too caught up in how many likes did this photo get, or did somebody say something mean. You gotta kind of take it all in stride.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's very well put. What I end up kind of viewing the way I see it is one, I hone in on actual critiques, like people that give you some kind of feedback, like, hey, your chest looks great in this, or I really like the lighting, or, covering your face wasn't a very good idea, or no one really likes horror, things like that. Things that are a little more specific than, oh, this sucks, or like, oh my God, it's so hot. The other thing is I look at kind of patterns, so to speak. So if a specific set of pictures ends up generating more likes than the others, then I kind of try to see, okay, what do these photos have in common that from the other photos that generated more hype. Another thing as well is the good and the bad and things like that. Like not necessarily individual comments, but if let's say for example a picture of me in a suit gets 30 comments of people saying how sharp dressed I look, then I kind of take that as something, versus if I do, let's say, a photo shoot with a female model and a lot of women kind of don't appreciate the model or something like that. The bigger wave, the trend, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. That's what I kind of take away from it and use it from the masses. I really wish there was a way that you could post things and have it like a check mark or a happy face or sad face. And I guess Facebook does that, but people aren't going to put a sad face on a photo they don't like. They just won't like it. So you can get that kind of direct feedback, like, hey, yay or nay, what's up? That because it's not necessarily, it's like you said, the biggest weight is whether you like the photo or not. So if you like it, you like it. But also it kind of steers you in a direction when you do want a certain, I guess you're doing a photo for a reason. If I'm doing an advertisement to for an event at the club and I want people to come to the club, I want to try to get a picture that I know the masses are going to like and they're more likely to share with other people and things like that. For example, my last birthday was Fire and Ice, so I decided to change it up and I took both advertisement photos in suits. And it turns out that even though I felt like it was more socially acceptable to pass out a flyer to random women where a guy was just dressed nicely, it turns out that for promotion purposes and things like that, people just liked it better when I was half naked. And so hey, lesson learned, check mark. I won't do that again. And as long as people are okay having a half naked dude sitting on the counter or at their, business card shelf or handing it to random people, then like we're good to go. That's going to generate more of a crowd. And it's just something like that I want to know. Like, for example, you captured a photo that I really appreciate, Michael, that was done upside down. It was an airless upside down, but you decided to flip it, I believe, and made it so on camera or the photo, she was right side up. And it's one of those things like you might be able, you're just doing it like, hey, let's see what happens. But you might
Yeah.
find out that like people, maybe the airless community didn't like it. Like, oh, you're ruining the photo, so to speak. And you can kind of, I don't think that's the way. I think it was actually a very liked photo. You even did some color gradient stuff on it because I think the fabric was tie-dyed. So, but kind of taking those things so okay, if I want to have a fun shoot and do something, I can post these pictures. But if this person wants something to market themselves, then that's something you take into consideration when you are doing the editing, if that makes sense. Like, I think it's a good tool. I don't think it's the end all be all, but I definitely think you get feedback, especially with you, Jules, where you doing it as a hobby and you're just posting pictures you like. You posting a picture and just having a bunch of attention generated by it definitely lets you know like you're going down the right path, so to speak. I mean, does that kind of feel like in the ballpark of how you feel?
Yeah, but my what I post is pretty broad as far as the categories. So, I can either do an auto show, maybe Comic-Con. So whoever's a fan of that particular genre, so to speak, as long as people are appreciating what I'm doing, I'm absolutely fine with it.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Sweet. Well, with that, I think we'll call it a show. Put a bow on it. So Michael, Jules, one of the most popular things I get as a male entertainer, stripper, whatever, is what's the craziest thing that's happened to me, yada, 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 in the club. And honestly, it's an ongoing question because every week something else happens. So you guys are on the show, so you're a victim to this as well. But because you're both photographers, I expect you to have weird stripper stories, of course, even though you just admitted making photos. So, hey, which ironically, the funny thing is, you're the third person that I've had on the show as a guest that apparently has done stuff naked. So I'm not as unique as people like to believe, which I think is great. So we'll go ahead and kind of correlate it to photo shoots. I'll go ahead and kick it off. We'll do our least favorite, and then we'll do our best event. So for me, it was actually my latest photo shoot. I ended up coupling it together and doing a couple of different looks, but one of the looks I did was debuting my Roadhog cosplay, which is a character from a video game called Overwatch. Super excited about it, honestly, for personal reasons, just because I never had a deadline on it, so I've kind of taken my time doing it in between my other projects. But it's been almost quite a year, I think, that I've been putting it together. Probably total actual fabrication time is maybe 2 months, but like I said, I've been spacing it out because I've had other projects. And so being able to finally do a legit photo shoot with it to debut it, and ironically, it being the first time I've put the entire costume on myself together, was really great. But the the worst thing about it is that it's kind of like most of my shoots. I'm exposed quite a bit, and it was an outdoor shoot. We were at a venue that kind of had like a junkyard feel to it to fit the character, and there was Spanish moss everywhere. So if for people that don't know that, it is where mosquitoes kind of infestate. And so I was getting chewed up to the point where on the photos, like I was like, there needs to be some serious photoshopping because I almost looked like I had chicken pox. I had so many mosquito bites on me. And luckily, I was wearing a mask, so they couldn't see me cringe when I was flexing for a photo, and I got bit at the same time. But yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable to sit there. I think I was probably in the vicinity of like 20 to 30 mosquito bites by the end of it. So that was probably one of my least favorite aspects of the photo shoot. The photo shoot itself was absolutely phenomenal, but that one detail like made it slightly uncomfortable. Jules, what's your least favorite photo relevant event?
Oh, this was a while back. A friend of mine actually, she had a boyfriend who was in the military. And she decided that she wanted to spice things up a little bit because they were separated. So she asked me to do a nude shoot. And, most photographers were not offended by nudity. I think the female body is beautiful. So we proceeded to do some, I was thinking it was a little more, the boudoir type nudity. So we start the photo shoot and it's calm at first, but then it kind of turned pornographic. So I was a little bit uncomfortable, but the pictures turned out really, really well. But yeah, I just, what do you do? It was very uncomfortable. I don't think it was a bad photo shoot. It just took a turn that I wasn't quite expecting it to take. But pictures turned out great. Hopefully, unfortunately, they're not together anymore. So I hope they didn't end up on the internet somewhere. I haven't seen them. But so that's my worst photo
Yeah,
shoot
you're kind of like,
experience.
wow, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, real quickly. But you have as you even though she was a friend of mine, you have to remain, stone faced and professional and so that's what I did. But yeah, it was a little further than what I was expecting. It was entertaining.
Gotcha, gotcha. How about you, Michael?
Oh man, there's a lot. Two, most of them are fails. Like when I first moved to Texas and started working for two new companies doing party pics. This was back in the film days, and both of the first shoots I did for both of those companies, all the photos were black. There was a camera malfunction. I thought, oh, I'm never working for these guys again. And but they gave me another shot, and it came out okay. So that really sucked. Lots of
Man,
babies, lots of boogers, and barf on me. Lots of frat kids, same. And I think one of the worst was, kind of going back to the shots we didn't take, is I was shooting baseball game for like Little League or something, and there's this hit out to right field, and this kid's running for it, and I'm like, oh, he ain't gonna catch that. I'm not even gonna bother pointing my camera at it. And this kid makes this diving catch, and just he caught the ball, and everybody's clapping, and the dad yells across to me, did you get that shot? And I'm like, no. I died a little inside at that moment. So that
oh
was definitely
God,
one of the worst. So I'm
that's
always
so
like, take
frustrating.
the shot, man, take the shot.
That's so frustrating. Oh God, I
Yeah,
feel for you.
that was my bad. That was my bad. Because I was there. I was right in, I could have had it. I didn't believe in that little 10-year-old, but he caught it.
Yeah, I
So yeah,
mean,
that was my worst. That was one of the worst.
hey, and it only takes one mistake like that to learn your lesson, and then it never
Oh
happens
yeah.
again, you know?
Oh yeah. Never again. Those are the
Mm,
ones that you never forget.
let's see. All right, so moving on. Appreciate that little snippet. For me, my best event actually is not even in front of a camera. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's kind of a blanket thing that's happened. Not as much as I'd like it to. I really wish it would, but it has happened a couple of times. And when it does, it's a really great feeling for me. Is when we're sitting down going through proofs, and you're, yeah, that one's good, okay, I like that one, no, this one's not bad, oh man, only if we did this, da da da, and then a picture comes up and both myself and the photographer are just like, oh yeah, like it just does that like you said, Michael, that emotion, it triggers that emotion in you where you just both react the same way. It's always a really good feeling because it's kind of like, you know what, that one picture just made the whole day worth it. And it's great because then you're excited because you want to edit it so you can post it and share it to the world. And yeah, it's just a blanket statement. That's probably one of my favorite things of doing actual photo shoots with people is just that, is getting that, stirring that positive reaction, that emotion out of a still. That it's great. It is one of my favorite things, and you kind of both get a feeling of accomplishment of like, wow, I shot that with that camera. Like, wow, that's me in that picture, and it's a great feeling. It's one of my favorites. Jules, how about you?
Actually, the location shoot that I just did, it was definitely way out of my comfort zone. I was very nervous because so much went into it between the model work. It was scary because you don't know how it's going to go. You hope for the best, but you just don't know until the pictures are done. And it was just fantastic though. It was a very long day. It was hot, still a lot of editing to do, but it was fantastic. It was a learning experience and something I definitely want to do again. So that's my best.
Nice. All right, Michael, what do you got for us?
Oh man, I think one time this was San Diego biotech convention. It was a pretty big deal. This is like 2000, and we're in the grand ballroom. There's probably like 2,000 people in there, and a bunch of press. And Prince Andrew, Prince Charles's brother, was giving some award or something, and he was supposed to come down into the crowd and take a picture with some kid, related to this thing, this charity. And the room was completely black, and I had like one moment to get him and this kid standing next to each other. And thankfully, I nailed the shot. I didn't get to see it for weeks because it was on film, but like it was probably one of the stressful moments because there was, all these people watching, because the room stopped while this photo happened. And so like, there's this moment where everybody's watching you, including this guy. And fortunately, the camera came through and I got the shot, but it was stressful, but it was definitely kind of one of those heightened moments where, it happened.
Nice.
That was fun. Yeah.
That's awesome.
The camera did all the work. I just pointed it.
Yeah, so humble, even in perfection. Sweet. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you both being on the show and giving us a little bit of snippets in your world as well as a couple of personal moments. I hope the listeners really appreciated it. Jules, where can people reach you at social media?
I don't have a professional page up yet, but as soon as I do, I will let you know.
Okay, awesome. Sweet. Michael, how about you, brother? How can people reach you for work and just appreciate the stuff you put out?
Michael Schulze Photo, SCHULZE. Michael Schulze Photo on Instagram, Facebook, or .com.
Awesome. That's fantastic. God, I wish I was that lucky to get my name like in all three. I had to change it just about every social media. Speaking of which, Cesar the Crowd Pleaser, you can catch this show on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Look up Cesar the Crowd Pleaser. You can catch me on Instagram and Twitter at CesarLabear7. And then on Facebook, I am Cesar Collazo, Collazo. Definitely check it out. And of course, if you want to see everything that I have, check it out at CesarTheCrowdPleaser.com. And my Patreon, where I have behind the scenes footage of act creations, of photo shoots. I'll only post about 2 or 3 edits per photo shoot, but you can catch all the other edits and a couple of the funny or not so great proofs on there as well. For my patrons, like I said, I'm going to be sending out proofs or prints of my last shoot that you all thought were the most popular. So I'll be sending those out. Keep an eye on that. Patreon.com/crowdpleaser. All right, Michael, thank you so much for being on the show, man. Really appreciate it. Your insight has been fantastic. I look forward to working with you again soon, brother.
Me too, man. Me too.
Julie, thank you. Like, you're just phenomenal. I've had a blast shooting with you. We do great things together. Let's keep it going. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right. Until next time, keep bringing the rain.
I am focused, I'm in my zone. You can binge watch like Game of Thrones. Reserve your judgments, don't throw no stones. Oohs and I scream as loud as you don't. Airplane mode on tablets and phones. Caesar's Crowd Pleasers is now on. Cesar, the Crowd Pleaser. If you need to pick me up, ladies, we gon' change your demeanor. Cesar, the Crowd Pleaser. We gon' do a little dance, we gon' make the naysayers believe us.